Hello and welcome to the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 60, brought to you by Wicked Tree Gear. Today we're talking archery technique and form with Bowhunting Fiend, Greg Litzinger. So stay tuned. All right. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. Happy Wednesday to you. Got a cool show today, bringing back the DIY report, of course. This is episode number 2 with Greg Litzinger, talking all things archery. And today we're focusing on form and technique. You know, how many of us hit the archery range during the off season or during the season, whatever the case might be, and are looking to kind of up our game for the upcoming hunting season. And you know, I think a lot of times we get into bad habits, of course, which kind of then hold true as we get into those tense moments or those moments of truth whenever, you know, all your practice should kind of pay off. And I don't want to see you go on autopilot, because there's definitely a mental component to shooting that you always want to kind of stay mindful in that moment to make sure you're executing your shot. But it needs to become second nature to a degree, to where you're not built with all that anxiety. And when you build good habits, you know, in the off season, those things kind of translate to the hunting season. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, is just what are some of those things that, you know, places where people make small mistakes that could cost you big time. And that's what we're talking to Greg about today. But before we kind of jump into all that, let's take a quick second to talk about our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. This episode is brought to you by Wicked Tree Gear, the longest lasting, fastest cutting, toughest tree trimming equipment you have ever used. Simply put, the toughest saws on earth. How tough are they? Tough enough to come with a lifetime warranty, although you probably won't need it because those things will take a serious beating. And right now, when you visit wickedtreegear.com, use the promo code TRUTH at checkout and get a 20% discount on your Wicked purchase. We are also brought to you by Exodus Outdoor Gear. The new Exodus Trek camera is a byproduct of all the consumer voices who have been excited about what Exodus Trail Cameras has to offer, but just can't fit a $200 camera in their budget, and that's okay. A budget-friendly camera backed with the industry's leading warranty is now here. The Trek comes in at $145. It has the same proprietary shell design as the Lift Series camera, which is kick-ass and rugged. Same 5-year warranty and unmatched customer service policies. You won't find guys or a company that's more on top of taking care of their customers than these guys. A 0.7 second trigger speed, photo, video, time-lapse, hybrid modes, all the things you know and love about the Exodus cameras. And then, of course, a single-line backlit LED display for easy setup. And you also get approximately about 20,000 images on a set of lithium batteries, which is kick-ass. I absolutely take advantage of that with my cameras being roughly usually about 3 hours away from where I live. If you'd like to learn more about Exodus trail cameras, check them out at exodusoutdoorgear.com, or if you happen to be on the Truth from the Stand website, you can hit the partners page at truthfromthestand.com and get to them as well. If you like what you see, you can save yourself $20 and use the promo code TRUTH at checkout. We're also brought to you by Tecumani Seed. Everything is bigger in Texas. No matter if you're in the South, Midwest, or the Northeast, Tecumani has your food plot seed needs covered. Visit Tecumani.com and check out their product selector tool to help pick the right seed for your needs. Use promo code TRUTH at checkout and save yourself 20%. Last, but definitely not least, we're also brought to you by Glacier Coolers, simply the world's finest. Whether you're hunting, camping, or fishing, you'll enjoy smarter design, stronger construction, and superior insulation of Glacier Coolers. Visit them at glaciercoolers.com, promo code TRUTH, save yourself 20% cash. With that said, let's go ahead and jump into the conversation with Greg and talk a little archery form and technique. All right, folks, we are live, and you're listening to part 2 of the DIY Report mini-series with Greg Litzinger, and today we are talking about technique. The all troublesome, helpful, sometimes damning technique that could be the make or break of your archery techniques. Shot. Yeah. So how's it going, my man?
Good, man. Good.
As you take a drink of water, I figured I would interrupt you. Maybe you'll choke on it.
Yeah. Technique. That's not how you drink water.
Yeah. Your cup to lip technique. I feel like you didn't hit your anchor point.
Exactly. You know, some pinky out, stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Too much pressure. I got too much pressure.
Too much pressure. So technique is one of those things where, you know, at least in my opinion, everyone kind of has their own approach. Like I'm sure you've seen this, but it's like I've seen guys. It's almost like anything, right? It's like whether it's a golfer or whether it's a guy, a pitcher or whatever. There's a right way to do things textbook wise, and there's like a wrong way, right? But how many guys have we seen? Like a golfer whose golf swing just looks horrible, but the dude's winning PGA tournaments, right? Matters. And I've seen guys, and I'm sure you have too, when you go to the range or when you go to a shoot or whatever, where you're looking at him going like, what the F is that guy doing? And then he's just lasering tens all day.
Yep.
You know what I mean? But it works for him, and he's figured out how to do it and be consistent, which I think is the most important part. But there are some do's and don'ts, right? Yes. Like some things like you're going to F yourself pretty good if you do these things. And if you do these things, you're going to give yourself a sporting chance to be accurate and be consistent. So the first thing I want to talk about a little bit is hand position and in the form of your hand position and how that kind of plays into like your overall shot. So I guess give me some like rundowns on, like your grip and how you should grip the bow and what that does for you.
For me, disclaimer, this is just my observation, not set in stone.
Right.
No professional archer, engineer, designer, just a guy like shoot bows.
Likes to shoot bows, but also has had coaching.
Yes,
and
true.
Has shot plenty of competitive tournaments. And
I've won a few here and there.
Yeah, you won a as I pat my own back. Yeah, no, you won a great tournament last year.
Yeah,
you
know what I mean? Jersey State.
Yeah. So, but anyway, so form, like from your perspective, your humble opinion.
Grip is user specific, but there is basic guidelines. If you were to pretty much take your hand and look at your, if you were to bend your wrist back, I guess your fingers.
So turn palm up,
and if you look where, it's hard to on a podcast, but you have your lifeline, and then you got your thumb. But
you got real hippie right there.
Yeah,
lifeline.
Man.
How's your lifeline look, man?
How's yours looking, man? Yeah.
People just turned off the podcast just now.
But it's pretty much a good way to interpret grip is, I call it, people call it 6-shooter. I call it crab clawing. If you were to take your index finger and your thumb and make an L, like a loser, and curl the rest of your fingers so they lightly touch your palm, and you go and you grab your bow, grab your grip of your bow. What this fingers does on the side of your on your palm, it'll actually lay on the side of your grip, and your knuckles should form some 45-degree angle, and you're let it just be nice and loose. Too many people want to death grip it. We're not shaking hands. We're not. It's a delicate, pretty much like holding an egg. Too much pressure, it breaks. Not enough pressure, falls down.
Right.
So if you were to curl your fingers and make that L, crab claw it, 6-shooter, there's a million different things, and just lightly touch the grip. And if you were to shoot 10 or 15 arrows, really, good shots, look at your hand. There should be a good defined outline of the grip in your hand. Mm-hmm. If it's muddled here and there, there's no defined edges of your grip, that means you're gripping your bow, different each time. And that's going to lead to inconsistencies, left, rights, ups, downs. So you could be not a lot of people aware of what the grip is doing in their palm. So after I take 15, 20 shots, I can actually see a defined, left and right of the grip.
Right.
And some grips are better than others for some people. Like I said, we were talking about earlier on the other podcast there. It's user specific, and everyone grips the bow a little bit differently, and it's, try a couple different bows that fit your hand. You can get any grip to work. Some grips will just work better than others.
Right.
So it's just being aware of what you're doing, how you grip the bow nice and light, and just paying attention to what's going on. Be self-aware of how you're placing the grip. Become a machine. Set the grip, set your hand in the grip, and do it the same each time. And as you were to, set your release on, set the grip, keep tension in the grip as you come up. A lot of guys will set the grip, and then they raise their bow up. And if you naturally, if you take your hand and it just wants to come up, you're going to shake somebody's hand. Mm-hmm. That's bad, because you set the grip good, as you lift the bow up, your hands
start to turn it.
Yes, and that's disastrous.
Right, because you want your elbow out, right?
Yes.
So that's like the idea of like whenever you what I try to do is I try to, like, when you bend your hand, like when you close your hand, it makes that love line, as you so poetically pointed out, where that kind of comes together. It's like there's a natural kind of like divot or groove in your hand. I almost try to set, like, my grip and my bow doesn't have an edge necessarily. It's more of a rounded, but I try to set like what would be considered the edge of that grip. I try to set it right in the middle of that divot every time, because I know when I do that, my elbow is going to stay out, and I'm going to keep that crab claw kind of position. Now, do you recommend? I've heard some people talk about, and I'm kind of going through this now as you kind of see my fashionable brace that I have on my my old man elbow. Struggling with a little bit of tennis elbow, and I've heard some people say that to help with that, and I know this isn't like specific to form in terms of your shot, but I've heard people say that you should grip your bow like as you're pulling back to tighten these muscles to engage those tendons when you pull back, and then go ahead and loosen it to get into your grip to shoot or whatever, because opening your hand and allowing all that pressure of your bow to draw back to hit those tendons and muscles that are relaxed is what can cause you some problems. So I don't know if you've heard anything related to that. Never heard that. I might have just totally made that up right now.
Hey, high five.
No, I actually Google boxed it.
Yes.
Only because my elbow's been giving me problems, and I was like, "Is there anything that I can do to keep it from?"
You don't call your buddy who's been shooting a bow a long time and stuff like that.
Well, I didn't want to bother you because I figured you're probably out winning another tournament or something, doing important shit instead of talking to me.
Yeah, digging up my septic system.
Yeah, there you go. So once you kind of have your grip in place, right? Because one thing you're talking about there is having a consistent place to grip, right? And so the other piece of that too then becomes like your consistent anchor points. So then let's move from the grip now to like now setting your anchor points beyond that.
You set the grip, you come up and you draw. And archery is about, like I said, there's really no right or wrong way to do it. The only way is the most consistent way that you can do it. You can have terrible form, terrible anchor point, terrible everything. If you do everything the same like a machine, you will outshoot somebody that has perfect form, perfect everything, that executes 50% of the time. If you have terrible everything, but you do it 90% of the time, you're going to win. You're going to win a lot.
Right.
You look at a lot of top level pros, some anchor low, some anchor high. They got weird everything, but they're consistent in what they do. So whatever your final draw, your position might be, just make it consistent. I shoot a handheld release, so I use my index knuckle goes underneath my jawline, and my shoulders are level. My back shoulder isn't up too high. Head over spine, and the nose the string slightly touches my nose, and I don't dip my head down. It's my personal preference. Some people do, but it's very repeatable for me under stress. Shooting uphill, downhill, cross chest, whatever, however it might be, I can hit that from any angle, that I might encounter in a deer woods, from a tree stand or, shooting uphill, or one of them, you have to shoot pretty much behind you and you're twisting your body, you're a contortionist. I can hit those. Yeah.
You got British all of a sudden. Too much of that. You've been reading too much Harry Potter and your daughter.
Yeah. But I can hit that form pretty much on cross body, so I'm very consistent in what I do. It might look funny to some people, but I think I look cool when I do it.
So you look cool as shit, man. Yeah.
But your full draw, whatever you use, an index, if you're using an index release, you want it to, be however you can repeat it, be it the web of your palm there between your thumb and your index finger on your jawline, or your thumb knuckle on your ear, or your index finger.
Finger?
Yeah. What's that?
Words.
Yeah.
They're hard to do. Between our love line conversation and our words, man, people are just like shutting it off. Like, what
delete this one. This guy's an idiot. But whatever you use in the back end, use it every time in the same spot. Index knuckle on the earlobe. That's what I shoot. People to shoot an index trigger release, I try either, some people can use their thumb knuckle, some people use webbing, or the index. I prefer the index on the earlobe, as it keeps the hand kind of easier for the finger to wrap around the trigger. But some people have other minds. Some people use the old thumb on the back of the neck. Some old timers shoot that way.
I've seen a couple guys do that. I can't do it.
Yeah, I've got crushed on the 3D course by these two old timers that shot that way. I mean, not just beat, like crushed. It's like, wow, your guys' form technically looks horrible, but they were rock solid. They did the same thing, same movements every time. They were machines.
They had shitty form every time.
Yes.
Not just sometimes.
Yeah, pretty much. So it wasn't shitty form. It was great form. Right. They can do it time and time again.
Right. I mean, for me, one of the things I've struggled with, you actually helped me out a lot with last year, was getting my shoulders level.
Yeah.
Because I had my elbow for the longest time was kind of going sky high on me. And it took me a while to like remember to level out, because when I was doing that, it was pulling my shoulder up.
Yep.
And I was noticing that I wasn't as consistent as I could be.
Yes.
And so I made a more conscious effort to make sure I was keeping my shoulders level. And then for me, it's funny because every time I shoot, I do get comments just about every time I shoot about my string position, because, you know, a lot of guys, and I used to do this, is touch their nose to the tip of their nose to the string. I actually now get it buried actually into like the corner almost of my nose. And I know it's probably not the right way. And I do dip my head just a little bit, right? But it's the one place that I can go to that I can find every time without a problem. And that's why I started doing it, because I started trying to change it and getting to the point to where I could just touch my nose on the string, but I was never able to get my anchor points all consistent every single time. I would have to think about it.
Yes.
To where it's like, if I bury that thing in the corner of my nose, you know, people are like, man, that's, you know, kind of weird. You're burying it that far. Does it bother you, or does it mess up like your string coming off or whatever? And I'm like, I've never had a problem with it. And I shoot way more accurately whenever I use that as my anchor point, because I can find that without thinking about it.
I got a big nose. That's not working for me. So
you bury that thing back by your ear.
I would be shooting the 6 inches to the right. Rip half my nose off. But.
Right. So speaking of kind of getting it to the next level of anchor point, right? So it's like keeping all those things consistent. And one thing I was just kind of mentioning here is the reason I do that side of the nose kind of bit is because where I have my kisser kind of placed, if I can place it all the way back in the corner of my mouth, but I actually place it on the top lip, and I let it kind of lift up a little bit. And then when I do that, it's like I know that I'm in the right place. So I guess talk to me a little bit about using a kisser, using a peep versus using neither of those two things. Because I've gone to the range and I've seen guys shoot that aren't using a kisser and aren't using a peep, and I'm like, dude, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure if I did it over and over again, I'd figure it out, right? But I'm like, it would feel like I showed up to school naked if I didn't have a kisser and a peep on my bow. Before we continue our conversation, let's talk about Wicked Tree Gear saws. Hardcore deer hunters need tools that can keep up. We don't baby our gear, taking on whatever Mother Nature happens to dish out. Check out Wicked Tree Gear hand saws and pull saws at wickedtreegear.com. Use promo code TRUTH to save yourself 20% on your next purchase with free ground shipping. And get a saw that's tough enough to work as hard as you hunt.
And how I would set up a customer would be, I'd have them literally draw the bow back a dozen or 24 times with their eyes closed.
Yeah, you've done this to me before.
Yeah, and I'd either take a selfie, and great cell phones now take pictures, you know, and just see where they're anchoring. I wouldn't put nothing on their string, just a D loop, have them just pull back, and I would make adjustments there. Either tweak their draw length a little bit to get something that's repeatable for them, because some people have, if they're overdrawn, they put a kisser button or peep sight in, it's not necessarily in the right place because they're drawn too far back. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to repeat when there's nothing, everything's too far back on the draw line. Right. You know, so their hand, everything's kind of off. So I like to just watch people shoot and see, because everybody has a natural anchor point. Some anchor high, some anchor low. People shot recurve, either like Olympic style recurve for years. Right. You know, they anchor really low. So there's a lot of different variables come into play. Bone structure, face structure, you know, injuries.
Yeah, you got a fat face.
Exactly.
Have a different draw.
Yeah, you know, and a lot of guys, face pressure can cause a lot of inconsistency. So I just like to watch people shoot before I make any type of adjustment. Sometimes I let them shoot 20, 30 times. You know,
right.
I'm like, all right. And if you're going to use a kisser button, I set the kisser button first. I'll keep the peep sight out of the bow. Mm-hmm. Get the kisser button in the corner of your mouth. Mouth closed, teeth touch one another, shoulders level, arrow level. A lot of people mistake when they shops or whatever, the target's on the ground. Well, everything has to be level. Arrow has to be level, shoulders have to be level.
And you can't count on that person necessarily having the best form and being consistent to where they're like, if you ask them to shoot at a sight that's on the ground, they would have to have great form, shoulders be level, and then bending at the waist to take their shot, and then not let their shoulder creep back when they do that, and all those things that happen naturally, or that you have to fight through repetition, right? Yeah, so. And you can't count on that person doing that consistently.
So have everything level to the T, not leaning back. I mean, there's a lot of different things. I'll try and speed this up and keep it simple, but it's just T form and basic, the arrow level, shoulders level, head level over the spine, just slightly turning. And we're only shooting, 3 yards. A lot of people want to shoot distance. Right? I'm just trying to set your kisser button or peeps. I always say we'll do the kisser button. Set the kisser button first. Have them shoot a little bit. No peep sight. get the target kind of set. And here's where I think a lot of people mistake, or they kind of rush it. They set the peep sight and their kisser button, and then they set their sights. Well, if it's not set up correctly, you can get some discrepancies. Say you set the kisser button, and you go to put the peep sight in, but you set the sight first, and then the peep sight don't line up with the sight, and then they're doing that little face, they're moving to accommodate. So I set up, we said, if you want to use a kisser button first, then peep sight, or backtrack. Kisser button, then sight, get a 20-yard pin, get where their housing is going to be, then set up the peep sight. Okay. So this way, the peep sight is centered on the sight housing.
Right.
You movable sight's a little bit differently, but like a fixed pin sight, you can do it that way, or even movable sight for the most part. You're not getting a lot of movement.
Right.
But this way, everything's in line. You're not, you're setting up your kisser, peep, and then putting the sight on. You go back 20, 30 yards. Now you're kind of trying to adjust the face.
Or you're trying to decide, do I move the sight or do I move the peep?
Yes.
Like, which one is the person? Because it's really the person's perception. Because that's the part that I always struggle with whenever I'm having a new bow set up. It's like, cause I get set up and I start shooting and I'm looking and it's like, and they're like, well, how's the peep look? And I'm like, it's a little low. But then I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, is the peep a little low or is my sight right? You know what I mean? So then it becomes like, well, which one am I adjusting? You know what I mean?
And before, like I said, once you get everything kind of somewhat in line, I'll have, once peep sight's in, kisser button set, or kisser button, no kisser button, I will go back to drawing with their eyes closed a dozen times. I don't want them to shoot. I just want them to draw the bow back. Have them, once they start drawing, close their eyes. Anchor. Open. What is it doing? Or is it low? Is it high? It's good. It's left or right, whatever. Do that 12 times. If I can get good, 10 times in a row, the same thing, I know they're consistently anchored in the same spot, and then we can make adjustments, to the peep that needs to be, or a kisser button, or however it might be. But it's very basic. It's not rocket science.
Right.
It's just being about finding the anchor point that's comfortable for that person. There is no perfect string at the corner of the eye. There is no formula for anything. It's how that person wants to shoot, because you can't make someone shoot differently than the way they've been shooting for 20 years in 10 minutes. Right. Muscle memories, you try and accommodate the person to the best that you can in that said time.
Right. Well, it's just like you were saying earlier, where it's like everyone has their form, right? Yes. And sometimes it's, and I'm air quoting here, quote unquote, correct or incorrect, right? But it's really what's working for them. So to your point, it's like, if that's how they shoot, set the bow up to work the best it possibly can work, or set your bow up. For those of you out there listening, just make sure your bow is being set up to work the best way it can possibly work for the way that you already shoot.
Yes. And it's a lot of guys in pro shops, you need to shoot this way, and they're very rigid and stubborn. A good coach, I look at shops, there should be somebody there. I call them coaches, because you're coaching someone into buying a bow. You're setting up a bow. You're coaching.
But not a salesperson.
Yes.
Right.
And a lot of guys, you have to do it this way. And a lot of people are uncomfortable with that. Like a good coach, a good mentor is going to work with what they have, ailments, body structure, or how they want to shoot. Because somebody's been shooting a bow for 20 years. They're not going to overnight just change their setup. You're going to have to show them, this is, I'm going to help you set up, and then guide them down maybe a different path. And it takes a long time to change someone's habits.
Right.
New shooters are great. Women just learn a lot faster than men. Hate to say it.
Well, smarter.
Yeah, they listen.
They die.
They might not listen to us, but they'll listen to a stranger, setting them up in a heartbeat. Because I've had a lot of husbands bring their wives in, and women will listen to me. Right. And the husband's like, I tell you the same thing. And they're like, hey, just go shopping. And it's like, okay.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason why they live longer. Yeah. They're smarter. It's like, I've never heard a woman say, hey, watch this, hold my beer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, you know what I'm saying? So it's
and some guys are stubborn, as you know. The most men they're set in ways. And
you said most guys are stubborn, as you know.
Yes.
Implying.
Yes, exactly.
I like how you took a nice subtle jab at me there.
But it's hard to make changes. So you're not going to get change overnight. So work with setting up the bow, how that person shoots now, and then make a few tweaks or suggest a few things, and maybe they come back, whatever. But to shoot at a high level, it requires effort from the shooter, to make changes. And a lot of people are part-time hunters / archers. They
Right.
pull the bow out in July, so you can't get them to change their mentality, their way of shooting. So the best thing to do is work with what they have, watch them shoot, and then hopefully, it works out for them.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the best you can do is just, as you were kind of saying, like get it set up for them, like in the way they shoot. If they want to make the commitment to make the changes they need to make to become a better archer, then you adapt their setup as they go. The one thing I wanted to ask you or talk to you about a little bit was something. Actually, I'll blame you for this because you.
Add it to the list.
Yeah, add it to the list. No, it's not a blame thing. It's actually a good thing. It was when we were shooting last year, before we both left for Montana. You had helped me with some things with my form after we shot, because I had asked you. It wasn't like you just did it, because that's not most guys who shoot well don't go just coaching guys, like unrequested.
It's disastrous.
It ends up in a bad place. But as we were going to shoot, I know that you're a good archer. I know you've won tournaments, and I know you understand, archery in terms of like not just, gripping and ripping, type of thing. So I'd asked you like, hey, while we shoot this 3D course, just watch me shoot. And if you noticed any things about my form that I can change, that can help me be more consistent, just let me know once we get through the 3D course. That way I can work on it at the bags, So we got through, and you helped me with a couple different things. You helped me with my release and how I was releasing. You helped me make sure I was making sure my shoulders were flat or straight. The other thing you helped me with was actually I was not extending my elbow far enough. I had too much bend in it, so I was using a lot of muscle to manage my bow, which helped me immensely. The other thing that you had suggested to me that I didn't make the change right away is because we started talking a little bit about shooting with one eye versus two eyes open, because you had just asked me while I was shooting, because you were standing on the opposite side. You were standing on my open eye side, and you were asking me, are you shooting with both eyes or one eye? And I said one eye. And I asked why, and you said, well, a lot of times, for some people, and this again, archery is such a specific by person type thing, right? Where some people shoot better with both eyes open than they do one eye, right? And so this year I was like, I kind of like to try that in the off season. So once the season got done, I got my new bow, and I was like, and I got, so I changed my entire setup this year, right? Went with an Obsession bow. I changed to a different Trophy Ridge sight, using the single pin. And I was like, I want to try shooting with both eyes open. So I started, while the weather was shitty, started shooting in my basement at like 13 to 15 yards, nothing far, just kind of getting used to it. And it has made a world of difference for me. Like I actually reduced my pre-shot anxiety by shooting with both eyes open, which was crazy. I never thought that shooting with both eyes open would make that big of a difference. I thought maybe technique wise it would make a difference, but it wasn't that at all. It was actually mental is where it made the difference. So I wanted to talk a little bit, or you just to kind of talk a little bit about shooting with one eye versus two eyes open. Like how is sometimes one more effective than the other, I guess?
Me, I used to be a two-eye shooter for years, and I had an injury at work where I scratched my right eye. So my left eye is technically stronger, even with glasses, because I just got, there's this residue in my right eye. So now I'm a one-eye shooter, and it has its pluses and minuses. But with two eyes, I can watch more of the target. It was natural to me to shoot with both eyes open, and I shot really well with it. And when this accident first happened, I didn't shoot that well because I tried shooting with two eyes, and my left eye would take over. Couldn't find out I needed glasses, so I got glasses, and that helps out.
They look good too. Let me tell you, you don't look like old. You don't look old at all. No, just
This is 40, by the way.
Right? Yeah.
But it really comes down to personal preference.
Right.
Some guys can shoot. You'll see guys in the range. Sometimes they'll have like the little hood clip coming down, and it makes them focus more.
Right.
So it's really just a matter of trying it and applying it, and for longer than a day or two. Some people can pick it up like, this isn't for me, but give it a try. Some people might do better with shooting with two eyes versus one eye. I was forced to shoot with one eye, and it does limit some things. Right. It took a while to get used to. Right. That's for sure.
I think what I liked about it was, so to me, and this is just from my own experience, is that I would think it would be really challenging if you had one eye that was super, super dominant. I think it would be hard. Like for me, it doesn't feel like I have one eye that's more dominant than the other. Because in theory, you would think if I were shooting with two eyes, I went from one eye to two eyes. Because I was using a 5-pin sight prior to this single pin, and so I was curious to see if I'm shooting with my right eye open, right, and I'm on target. When I open my left eye, I should naturally start shooting to the left, right? Because now I'm opening up that field of vision. Like it should be off.
Not if you're right eye dominant.
Right. Okay.
If you're, and eye dominance plays a lot too, because.
Well, that would make sense then, because I really didn't have to move my sight much at all.
Yeah, so that means you're good.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, there's guys that are left eye dominant that shoot right eye. They're forced to shoot with their left eye closed or an eye patch.
Right.
Because it.
Pirate.
Yeah, pretty
pirate
much.
Archery.
I mean, I've had to use patches on young kids before because their parents, they're better off learning to shoot left-handed, but the parents are like, you're a righty. I do everything right. He's going to do everything right. All right, Dad, Mom, let's make it a lot harder than it needs to be.
Right.
If you're left eye dominant, I'd have learned to try to shoot left-handed. Be a way easier, way simpler.
Right.
But guys that's been doing it 20, 30 years, it could be a challenge that most people don't want to partake.
Right.
I mean, I had shoulder problems. I tried shooting left-handed, and it was like, this is going to suck.
Right.
Because
you've been shooting a long time, so it wouldn't. Yeah.
And muscle memory. Like, I can't even throw a ball left-handed. I look like I'm having a seizure or something.
Yeah,
it's terrible. We're trying to right left-handed. I'm like, what am I, 4? Like, it's bad. But there's some guys that if you want to continue shooting, sometimes you got to switch it up. But if you're left eye dominant, then shoot left-handed, in my opinion, working with people.
Right.
If you're a new archer, learn how to shoot left-handed.
Right. But, how do you figure out what eye dominant are they? Or they are, rather?
I just, for the most part, make the triangle out front.
Yeah.
Both eyes open, close one, and then close the other.
Right.
Like if I close, I do that. I'm centering your deer head. Mm-hmm. Close left eye, deer head still center. I close my right eye. I can't see the deer head.
Right. So for people out there listening, you basically take your hands, arms out in front of you, directly out in front of you, make a triangle with your index finger and your thumbs coming together, and then pick a focal point out. Yep. And so in this case, I'm looking at my Euro mount. I close my right eye. That Euro mount stays in the same spot it is when I have both eyes open. I close my right eye, and now the Euro mount has moved, or my triangle has now moved to the right and cut off part of the Euro mount. Tells me that I'm right eye dominant. Yes. So it's interesting because when I shoot with both eyes, and we'll go to we're going to the range today to shoot, so you'll see this, but it's like I'll to like 30, 40 yards, like I'm deadly with both eyes open. I get past 40 yards, and my depth perception of seeing that pin clear enough becomes challenging, right? So sometimes I'll actually change when I get out to 15, 60 yards. I'll then go back to shooting with one eye.
And that's just probably a muscle memory kicking up because you're just starting this new double eye shooting in your basement with lighting and stuff like that.
Right.
So, and the lighting has a lot to do with what you can see, like how you can see pins, like indoor. Like the place.
I can't shoot indoor archery. Like, I mean, I do here at my house, like, because it's 15 yards. But the reason I got a membership at that archery club is because I was only going to indoor ranges, and I couldn't shoot for shit in an indoor range.
The club I belong to, it's like the lights are like right above your head. Like I have to shoot either from. I can't shoot when nobody else is there because I can't shoot on the line because the way the lights are set up, I can't. It puts a halo on the pin, and like I got to wear a hat all crooked how I don't normally shoot, so it's not really enjoyable.
Right.
For me to shoot indoors, I'd have to really change my whole setup to shoot indoors, which I'm not really
into
doing that right now.
Yeah,
even though I probably should. But
so the next thing I want to talk about a little bit, and this is the last piece for this part 2, in talking about technique. So I want to talk about the different types of releases and the pros and cons. So I think most people often start out with the wrist rocket finger, type of deal,
finger poppers.
Yeah. And then slowly graduate to, some type of back tension or hinge or something of that effect. So just, I guess, run through the pros and the cons of each, because you and I have talked a little bit about me making a change. And today I actually, when we got together, I was like, you know what, I don't think I'm going to change this year, because I was planning to change to some type of hinge release or a back tension release. And I'm shooting this new bow so well right now that I'm like, am I changing just because I want to shoot a back tension release, or am I changing because I think it's going to fundamentally help me do something better than I'm currently doing it? And that's sometimes hard for an archer to ask that question, right? Because it's like, do you just want to pull 70 pounds because you want to pull 70 pounds like your buddy? Or do you want to pull 70 pounds because you legitimately need to pull 70 pounds for something? And that's what it was for me with that back tension release. Is like, do I really need it? Or am I doing it because I just feel like I should, because I'm a good enough archer now that I should shoot some type of back tension release?
Well, not to sway your listeners, but a back tension, there is no such thing as a back tension release. Right. It's a method of activating a release.
Yeah.
Index finger, thumb, hinge, spike, tension, activated release. Back tension is just a method of contracting your back muscles while you're slowly kind of like pulling back. So you can use that for any release, like your release you have.
And you
here.
taught me a methodology to use whenever I'm shooting with that one to make sure I'm getting the right amount of back tension in my arm going back and following through to make sure my form is all together.
Yeah, and so like I said, basically people start out with the index for the most part. The average consumer / archer in this era. I come from finger drawing era. There was no release errors. There was like one release company out when I started shooting so long ago. So I learned how to shoot with fingers. So nice. And then I got like I said, the wrist strap allows you to pull more weight, etc. But you have an index finger release, and then you got your T handle release, thumb, a lot of thumb activated, or a hinge, or a spike release, which is no moving parts, which is what I shoot. And then you have tension activated releases that break under a pre-described set of amount of tension that you set in the release. So say a tension activated release, your holding weight is 12 pounds. You set the release to break at 15 or 16. It won't break until it reaches
that poundage.
Yeah,
right.
That's a good way to learn. A back tension style of a method of shooting. I was self-taught in the beginning. I was an index trigger release guy. As I started shooting more and more 3Ds, I developed target panic, like really bad. And target panic, I mean, encompass everything. Hanging the pin hanging up, the pin not on the target, finger popping, however it might be. So I bought a safety hinge, to teach myself how to shoot, quote unquote, properly. Well, that was disastrous. Because I didn't know what I was doing. I was reading like self-taught, so it was a long struggle. But get back to the releases here. I got a coach, and he showed me how to activate an index finger trigger release with back tension, hooking the release deep in your index, and just letting the release go and just pulling. Pull until it broke. And some releases are better than others for that. They're a crisper trigger. And then I went to a hinge, a thumb, and every release in between, and I settled on a spike release. But there's basically, you got your index trigger releases, all brand shapes and sizes cost. The more you spend, the better quality release you're going to get. Then you got your thumb barrel releases. You activate it with your thumb, and there's some old school ones you operate with your pinky. It's showing my age a little bit, but
pinky fingers, like you're an Italian mobster over here or something.
And then you got your hinges, when they've come a long way in these last couple of years, but still basic principle. And then you got your spike releases. So it's all personal preference. There's guys that win, top level tournaments with index trigger release. There's guys that win with hinges. There's guys that win thumb with spike. So it's really finding what you're comfortable and what we were talking about earlier, being repeatable for you.
Right.
A lot of guys think going to a back tension style method of shooting with an index or hinge is going to make them a better shooter if the bow's set up properly.
Right.
If your bow's not set up draw length, it's set up good.
You had all your anchor points right.
Yeah, you go to a hinge, it could be disastrous. Or you go to a thumb and you try to activate it, you're pulling through, it can be disastrous. Going to a back tension method style of shooting, your bow needs to be set up almost perfect. Really close to perfect, and make adjustments as needed. And a lot of guys are overdrawn. And the key to back tension is most people are pulling back so far that they're compressing their rhomboids and all them back muscles. There is nowhere to go. So they start using this arm method, trying to activate it. That's not really back tension. You're just
pulling it through.
Yeah. So to shoot, an index with back tension and a spike release or hinge, your draw length's got to be pretty much spot on. It makes it shooting a lot more comfortable. Right. Because you don't want to draw too much, then your muscles are getting tired. Right. So there's a lot of variables come into play, and a lot of people try to flip between the index and a thumb and a hinge. Very few people can do that effectively and pick up good habits.
Right.
A lot of guys, I see it on the range all the time. One day the guy's got an index, high-end Carter trigger release. Next time he's got a thumb, he's got a stand thumb, and then he's got a hinge, and it's like just constantly changing. It's like you got to stick with one thing. It's a long, slow process sometimes.
Right, of being consistent.
Yeah, and a new release is going to make you a better shooter.
Right. Well, I think since you dropped the big word rhomboids on us here, it's getting all medical like over here. This guy, he's going to break down some biology or some muscle structure.
That's the only word I really know. That's
the
only muscle I know.
Actually, it was on his word of the day toilet paper. So. But with that, I think we wrap up our part 2 of technique. Thanks for joining, brother.
Yeah, man, no problem.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. We'd like to thank Greg for joining. Be sure to give him a follow on Instagram if you're not already. He's always kind of giving tips, archery tips, and also just in general scouting tips as well. He does a great job capturing some video of the scouts, and he's scouting a lot of buck beds and stuff like that. So a lot to kind of pick up on there if you follow him on Instagram. We'd, of course, like to thank all of you for listening, and if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating. And be sure, while you're there, to subscribe to the podcast. We'd be super appreciative if you'd help us out with those 2 things. And before we shut this thing down, we need to give a big shout out to our partners that continue to help us make this podcast possible. Wicked Tree Gear, Exodus Outdoor Gear, Trophy Ridge, Ozonics, Obsession Bows, Tecumani Seed, Glacier Coolers, Ramcat Broadheads, and Trophy Taker Rests. And until next time, we'll see y'all.
I ain't welcome anymore. A long time coming, if it all. It takes a special knowing to colorful. Damaged heads, broken letters. Rationalize yourself in numbers, but I